that in fact all the other obstacles, all the other chains that hold you back from being a good person, from actualizing your potential, they stem from this one chain. This is the first link in almost all the other chains. What are we talking about today? Anybody here think they're a greedy person? That's good. Honesty is good. Ramadan's all about introspection. It's all about considering the vices that I have in myself that I need to scrub clean. This is kind of what it's all about, right guys? So, I want to begin with a story about Isa alayhi salam that's reported in Tafsir al-Tabari, in the Tafsir al-Ma'idah, along with other surahs that mention Isa alayhi salam's journey with Bani Israel. He came to them at a time where they had scripture from previous prophets. In fact, he had just coincided his birth with other prophets, Zakaria and Yahya before him. And classic Bani Israel, they rejected him, they dragged their feet, and then they tried to ally with the government of the time to have him killed, to have him shut down. And it's not relevant particularly to our topic, it's very important to see that this story is nothing new. That certain people, that they ally with the powers that be, ally with the forces of strength, the militaries, the technologies, the economy, to try to stamp out the truth. That's their norm. And the test is, will you keep going or not? Will you be thrown off track by the few allies that it seems you have, or the few supporters that it seems you're surrounded by, or the lack of means that seems to afflict your movement? Or will you be encouraged by the fact that this is the path of all prophets? This is the path of all righteous people. And you just have to keep going. Because the effort, the struggle is the point, not the results. Not the end, not the conclusion. That is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exclusively. So, they mention some of their shortcomings that led to them rejecting Isa alayhi salam, Jesus be upon him. That led to them dragging their feet with him and not being able to align with his message despite having previous scripture. And one of those main reasons was their greed. They were greedy for the worldly things. They were greedy for materialistic things. And so they weren't able to receive the message as it was supposed to be received because of their greed and their overly attached hearts to the materialistic things around them. So the story that Tabari mentions, even though it's not a hadith, it just narrated, like I said, the tafsir of Surah Al-Ma'idah, that Isa alayhi salam was walking, going about in his da'wah as he would, as all prophets do. And he comes across a man and he tells him, join me. One of the men from Bani Israel, join me in this da'wah. Join me as I go spreading the message of Allah, this career path of the prophets. And he joins him, and before they go about on their journey, he tells him, let's have a quick meal. I have here 3 loaves of bread. We're going to pray quickly together, have our lunch or our breakfast, and go about in this mission to do what? To go give da'wah to. So the man says, sure. So Isa starts praying. And the man thinks, there's 3 loaves of bread. It's going to be 1.5 each. It's not enough for me. I'm a big boy. So he eats 1 loaf. And he says, that way after we'll split 2. And he says, Allahu Akbar. You know when people pray right after they eat? Then they hit you with one of those tarawih burps and hit you side to side and hit you right in the face. And you're just like, what rak'ah are we on? That's what he does. But it's bread. It's not garlic bread, hopefully. So he eats a loaf of bread and he joins him in prayer. They finish the prayer. And Isa turns around and he says, where's the 3rd loaf? We had 3 loaves of bread here. Now there's 2. Where did that one go? What does the guy say? I have no clue. There was no 3rd loaf. There was only ever 2. You ever see people like that? They lie to you in your face. Like this just happened. How can you try to gaslight me when I was there? And it happened 20 seconds ago. That's what greed does. Greed leads people to be so blind that they'll deny the sun. Out of their greed to have more of the truth, even if it's staring them in the face, and they'll look at you in the eye and they say this never happened. Greed makes you so blind. Makes you look so foolish to others. And he says to Isa, I swear by Allah, I don't know what you're talking about. There was only ever 2 loaves of bread. How do you deal with such people? Yeah, Ahmed. You should walk away. It's the best method. Somebody like that, there's nothing to be done. At that moment especially. There's no argument that could be had. Maybe sometime later, but at this moment, we're going to have to drop it because it's a brick wall. And that's what Isa does. He says, fine, let's go. Continue on our journey, come with me. They come now to the banks of a river. And Isa tells this man, walk. He says, what do you mean walk? We don't have a boat. We're going to drown, the current. He says, Bismillah. In the name of Allah. And he walks over the water. And this man feeling like, what am I doing? We're not sinking. We're not getting wet. And they get to the banks on the other side. And he says, who are you? What are you doing? He says, I'm a prophet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me this ability. He's the one who performed this miracle, not me. So I ask you in the name that just showed you what you just saw. Who ate the food? The guy says, Wallahi, I have no clue what you're talking about. Got to double down at this point. Can't look like an idiot. So he says, I have no clue. He says, sure. No problem. They continue on their journey. Hours pass. They get hungry again. So they catch a gazelle. And they slaughter it. And they butcher it. And they cook it. And they eat their fill. And then Isa Islam raises his hands and he dua and it springs back to life. And it runs away. And the guy's like, that's in my stomach right now. How did this happen? What on earth is going on? Isa Islam tells him again, I asked you in the name of the one who showed you this miracle. I told you I'm a prophet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did this. The one who just showed you this before your very eyes. Who ate this first loaf of bread? The guy says, Wallahi, I have no clue what you're talking about. It's fine. They continue on their journey. They come to the outside people, and Isa Islam, he crouches down, and he makes 3 piles in the sand. And he raises his hand again to make dua, and he says, Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bless us. And these 3 piles of sand turn into 3 piles. So Isa Islam says, what? This pile is for me. This pile of gold is for you. And the 3rd pile belongs to who? Whoever ate the 3rd, it was me. I did it. Yeah, I got hungry and I just, right away he just goes out. Makes himself look like a complete fool. Because greed begets greed. Greed has no end. The scholars say that greed is like the seawater. The thirsty person who drinks seawater, what's going to happen? You only get here. It will never quench anything. In fact, the more that you drink, the thirstier you get, and the only end of that is you die from consumption. Right? Right, brother? Make sense? Checking. So, he doesn't care. He's not even wary of how foolish he looks, or that he's lying in the face of these miracles, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing him wonders in front of his very eyes, and all he can think about is his stomach and his wallet. Can't even be daunted or bothered by the fact that he just walked on water, that he just saw dust transmuted into gold, that he saw Allah life to the dead before his very eyes. And all he is the bread and the gold. So he says, I did it. He's hungry for. This is exactly what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us. من كانت الدنيا همه فرق الله عليه أمره وجعل فقره بين عينيه وما يأتيه من الدنيا إلا ما كتب له. Whoever makes this worldly life in their scope, that's their number one concern. They're greedy. They want more. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will disperse their affairs. Doesn't matter how much they have, how much power, how much wealth, their entourage, all they see is that it's not enough. They're anxious, they're nervous all the time. It doesn't bring them comfort. It doesn't bring them protection. It doesn't bring them solitude or tranquility. All they see, he said, Allah will put poverty between their eyes. All they see is, I don't have enough. What am I going to do on a rainy day or a snowy day or the days in between? What about them and that and this? To the very end. Al-Qurtubi, he mentions in his book At-Tadhkirah, the reminder about fears of death in the hereafter. He says it was reported about one of the people on his deathbed. People came to him, as they do, and they say La ilaha illallah. Remember the mercy of Allah, asking for forgiveness. Say your shahada. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever dies and the last words on their lips is Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, enters Jannah. And the last thing that this person was able to say was 10, 20, 30, 40. They're doing counting. They're doing the math. To the very end, and the last breath is 50 over here, 60 over there, 70 over here. To the very last breath, all they can see is this stuff. Just as the Prophet. And on the opposite end, وَمَنْ كَانَتِ الْآخِرَةَ هَمَّةً, and whoever that the hereafter is primary concern, that's in their scope, جَمَعَ اللَّهُ لَهُ شَمْلَهُ, Allah will bring all their affairs together. They may not have as much money. They have debts. They have financial problems. They have turmoil in their career choices, but Allah brings it all together. That this person, you'll be like, I know you're going through some stuff. They're like, alhamdulillah. They don't see it. Everyone else is like, oh man, it must be tough not to have. And they're just like, alhamdulillah. Good. They have that contentment that money can't buy. That's what Dave Chappelle said. One of the reasons he became Muslim, there's a couple of reasons. One of them was his brother became Muslim. And he said to him, I'm rich, I'm famous, and I can't sleep at night. And you're broke, and you just look so peaceful. And his brother told him, that's Islam. I have the right lens. I'm not greedy for it. I'm not entranced, encapsulated by all this nonsense that has taken our society and the world by storm. So he says, I took the loaf of bread. So that means I get 2 piles and you get 1. What does Isa tell him? He tells him the first pile of gold is yours. The second pile of gold is also yours. And the third pile of gold is also yours. You can have all 3 of them. But you'll never walk with me again. You've lost my companionship forever. You can't come with me on this mission. It's a noble mission, and you've proven to be not so noble on several occasions. The man doesn't even care. It's like, I have 3 piles of gold. What's Doge at right now? Let me invest it. Right? Well, who cares? Be your companion? What's that about? Like eating 1 loaf of bread a day and just walking around? These 3 piles of gold and now I'm filthy rich. And that's another important thing to realize about greed, is that with greed, you'll be so oblivious to the things that you're losing that actually matter. When you chase after things, worldly things, materialistic things, things of this worldly life blindly, you're going to lose sight about what's actually important. In your effort to have more, to dress fancier, to eat nicer, if that is not kept in check, you're going to lose sight about what actually matters before your eyes and you can't see it. Trials, tribulations, reminders, don't do bad, that will pass by under your nose and you're completely oblivious to the opportunities that are worth the world and everything in it. Maybe mentorship, or lessons, or reminders that you desperately need. And they completely go over your head because you're not looking in the right places, you're blinded by this greed. Ibrahim ibn Adham, rahimahullah, he said, لو يعلم الملوك وأبناء الملك ما نحن فيه من النعيم لجالدون عليه بالسيوف. He said, if the kings and the princes, the sons of kings, if they knew what we had, knew what we enjoyed of closeness to Allah, of knowledge of our purpose, of living for an actual reason, of striving for the hereafter, of connection to the tradition, our relationship with our Prophet ﷺ, if they knew what we enjoyed of these things, they fought us with their swords. He lived in a time where there was a lot of political intrigue. Sons and fathers and uncles and nephews and cousins fighting for the throne, fighting for governorship of this land, or ruler of this land, the kingdom, the khilafah. It was non-stop in that time. They're fighting over, they're being greedy over these things, but if they knew what we had, they would have said, let's fight these people, because that's so much more worth it. They don't have this experience, the people who lust after worldly things and are greedy for them. Similarly, Abdullah ibn Mubarak, he said, مَسَاكِينَ أَهْلُ الدُّنْيَا خَرَجُوا مِنْهَا وَمَا ذَاقُوا أَطْيَبَ مَا فِيهَا. They're poor. They are poor, the people of this world. No, it doesn't matter how much they have. Because they exit it, they die without tasting the sweetest thing it has to offer. And they told him, what is that? Mahabbatullah, the love of Allah. وَمَعْرِفَتَهُ, and knowing Him. وَذِكْرُهُ, and to mention Him, to remember Him all the time. وَالْأُنْسُ بِهِ, and being comforted by His presence, by what He has to offer. That's the most enjoyable thing that this world has to offer. And anyone who tries to fill that need with the worldly things, they're going to be miserable. There's no other way about it. It doesn't matter how much they have. That is the most worthwhile thing that this worldly life has to offer. All this is over his head, right? Isa leaves. He's looking at 3 piles. How am I going to count them? I got to get a horse now. I got to put them in the bank. If there's banks back then, see the stock market. And in the midst of all this, 3 vagabonds are exiting. So 3 criminals, 1 and 3 piles of gold, right? Introductions are in order. They kill him. That's it. That's also the end of greed, by the way. The second you think you are from underneath your feet, the rug gets pulled very fast. Either through some kind of calamity, some kind of misfortune, Doge goes back to 0, whatever it may be, the rug pull happens very quickly. And if it doesn't happen with one of these misfortunes or some other mishap where you have to pay more than you thought or whatever, it's going to happen with your death, which is always around the corner. Life is short. So they kill him, and just like that, his lies, his foolishness, him sacrificing the companionship of one of the greatest prophets ever, Isa alayhi salam, all of that ends with what? He doesn't even get to use the gold for a single instance. He doesn't trade a single gold coin. That's the end of his greed. Now they turn to each other. This guy's rich. He had 3 piles of gold. He must have family. He must have been going somewhere. Someone knows that he's here. So we have to skip town. So they tell one of them, you go into town, buy us some supplies so that we can get as far away from here as possible. We're going to need food and we're going to need supplies. So he says, sure. And he goes into town now to buy the supplies with some of the money they give him. While he's gone, the two turn to each other and they said, you know what's better than 1 pile of gold each? 1.5 each. This guy comes back. We give him the same treatment as the guy. And that way we split it, me and you, 1.5 each. Forget this chump. They dap each other up or whatever. They shake on it, and that's that. This guy now, he's going into town, probably grumbling to himself, like, why I gotta get the supplies, you know? Why they making me the errand boy? I don't want 1 pile of gold. I want all 3 of them. These guys are bums. They're chumps. I'll take all 3 of them. But I can't fight them. I can't risk them overpowering me. I can't risk it going wrong, so I'll just poison the food. That way I'll just sit, watch as we have our meal, and I'll just be like this as they're eating, and then they die, and then I have 3 piles of food. It's a win. So he poisons. Right? He comes back now. He's like, hey guys, I got Chick-fil-A. They kill him. Done. They say, all right, let's eat this meal quickly. All this murder and plotting is hungry. Thank you. It's important for my self-confidence. We'll eat this meal quickly, and then we skip town. They eat. Shortly they... How many piles of gold we got? How many corpses? So some people can't count. 3 piles of gold, 4 corpses, the original men. See how quickly you forgot about him? Isa alayhi salam comes back now with his disciples. And he looks at this scene. And he begins to weep. And he tells them, this is the end of this worldly life and the people who greed after it, who lust after it. This is exactly how it ends. And he tells them, don't touch this gold. Let's get out of here. Because greeting after these things will only have a cursed end. And as quickly as you think you have it, it will be gone. And you'll lust for more. And the people who read to these details, who are aware, who think with the correct lens, they stay on those, and they're not taken for a ride by these deceptive, shiny things that the world surrounds you by. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sums up all the things that people seek with their greed, all the things that people lust after in Surah Al-Hadid, where He says, اعلموا أنما الحياة الدنيا لعب وله وزينة وتفاخر بينكم وتكاثر في الأموال والأولاد كمثل غيث أعجب الكفار نباته ثم يهيج فتراه مصفرا. Know with certainty that this worldly life and everything that it has to offer is going to be summarized as play, idle amusement, luxuries, things that you use to boast amongst each other with. I have more, you have less, you're ugly. I'm rich, you're poor. That's all it is. That's all the end of it. And competition in wealth and children. Constantly competing. This person had a child, now I have to have a child. This person had a horse at their wedding, I have to have a magic carpet. People just constantly boasting and competing over things that will all, what's the end of it? He says, it is like a rain that causes plants to grow. And once the season changes, and then becomes like scattered ash. Becomes nothing. And then there's the hereafter, he says, which either punishment or reward, and it's eternal, it's forever. It is completely forever. So having that perception and having that important, because it will allow you to lock in. You won't be distracted. Anybody here gets distracted by these things or feels like they're distracting? You have to. There's no exception. There's no person whose religiosity makes them exempt, because it is by design. It's by design. It's not something that you were made to rise above completely. زين للناس حب من النساء والبنين والقناطير المقنطرة من الذهب والفضة والخيل المسومة والأنعام والحرث ذلك متاع الحياة الدنيا والله عنده حسن المآب. It has been made pretty. It's been made shiny on purpose. The adornments of spouses, of wealth, of children, of gold, of silver, of riding animals, in our context would be cars, right? cattle and agriculture. These things in their very nature have been made enticing to people. The Prophet ﷺ told us, لو كان لابن آدم واد من ذهب. If the human being had a valley of gold, what would he want? He'd want another one. He wouldn't say, I have a whole valley, that's enough. He'd say, I want another one. وَمَا يَمْلَأَهُ إِلَّا التُّرَابِ. Nothing will fill his mouth, nothing will shut him up, except for the dirt, when they bury him. It's the only time that he won't ask for more. He said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the human grows old, and everything grows old with him. His looks, intellect, his power, her beauty, everything will grow old. Everything that we have in our lives, he said, that grows old too, except for two things. If everybody can please move up, Jazakumullah khairan, just to make space, there's plenty of people coming in, Jazakumullah khairan. He says everything will grow old in the human, their power, their looks, their intellect, except for two things. Their love and their desire for life, to live longer. That's human nature to want to live more. It's human nature to want to have more, despite their old age, despite the fact that they can't use it anymore. Look at the Rothschilds and all these other people. They're so old, they sneeze dust, right? But they still want more. They still are, trying to expand their portfolio. They're still trying to control more things, right? Affect policy change and worldwide change that they live to see. 100%, they will not live to see it, right? They're in their 80s and 90s. Why are you trying to change policies and affect things to make yourself richer, to make your power more cemented, when you won't live to see it? You have 1 foot out already. Because that's human nature. The more you greed after it, the more you lust after it, the more it takes hold of your heart until perhaps you die saying 10, 20, 30, 40. A friend of mine told me this story in modern terms. People might hear it from Al-Qurtubi, that never really happened. Sure, but it happened in real life. Where he had a relative who was in a coma for a long time. And he wasn't, what we'd call practicing religious, whatever. So when he finally woke up, they told him, hey man, this is a second chance at life. You were out for X amount of time. It was really long and it's serious. Maybe you should pray, maybe you should do this. You got a second chance. Allah woke you up from the dead, literally. If you're going to wake up. And the man was just start talking business. Started talking about the business that he missed out on. Then shortly thereafter, he fell back into a coma and died. It's real. It happens all the time. So you got to make sure that you're not lusting after these things. How do you do that when it's by design for you to lust after? How can you do that when that's how Adam alayhi salam, our father, the first human being, got out of Jannah? It was through greed. Shaitan didn't come up to him and say, hey, these trees are delicious. This tree is delicious. This tree is nice. What did he say? Huh? He said, هَلْ أَدُلُّكَ عَلَى شَجَرَةِ الْخُلْدِ وَمُلْكٍ لَا يَبْلَى. Oh Adam, let me tell you about a tree in Jannah. Eat from it, you will live forever, and it will grant you dominion that never finishes. He went for the greed. He went for that nature. He didn't tell him disobey Allah, it doesn't make sense. He didn't tell him if you think about it this way, these are the same. No. He said this tree makes you live forever, and it grants you dominion, ownership over things that will never finish. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is warning us that this is by nature, this is by design. And like I was saying in the beginning, greed is that first link. So many of the other obstacles blocking you from connecting with Allah, from being a better person. If you look at the first thing we spoke about, Sister Maha, what did we talk about? Laziness. That's greed for comfort. It's greed for comfort. I don't want to leave this comfort. I want more of it. I want to live comfortable from A to Z. Lust, greed for sexual desire. Fear or arrogance, that's greed for what? Didn't hear anything. Control, power over others, greed for reputation, greed for status. That will always be behind what people's uncontrollable anger or their arrogance. They're greedy after these things. Envy, that's quite obvious, right? Greed for what other people have. So all the things that we're going to cover, almost all of them, root is in greed. So if greed is by design, if it's a part of us, what's the solution? You can find it in a single verse of the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah At-Taghabun, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ وَاسْمَعُوا وَأَطِيعُوا وَأَنْفِقُوا خَيْرًا لِأَنفُسِكُمْ يُوكَ شُحَّ نَفْسِهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. Ayah number 16 in Surah At-Taghabun, Allah tells us the solution is in these 5 things. 5? Yes. So the solution is in these 5 things. Number 1, he says, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Be mindful of Allah as much as possible, as much as able. You always got to be consciously locking into Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being the main component, the main provider, the main actor, the main character in all of these blessings and all of these things that people want and that you yourself want. Is it haram to want these things? No? Some of these things, spouses, gold, silver, animals, agriculture, none of these are haram. They could be haram, but by their default is that they're not haram things. But you got to be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all of them. What does that mean? That you know He's the source of these blessings. That you do not procure them by disobeying Him. That makes no sense. That's the first sign that you're greedy. That you're procuring these things that Allah blessed you with or blesses others with by disobeying Him, by doing it in ways that He prohibits. So you know that He's the source of these blessings. You show Him gratitude. You're fully conscious of the fact that He takes as He wills, that it's all a test. Umar ibn Khattab, he said, poverty and riches, wealth and poverty, they're 2 camels, they're 2 rides. And I don't care which one of them I ride towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever Allah tells me through both. And when he became the Khalifa, commanding 1/3 of the world's population at the time, his standard didn't change. So he said they're both tools. They're both vehicles of transport that to the same destination, which is always Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Doesn't matter which way I'm tested, I won't lose sight of the reality. The Prophet ﷺ told us how to be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ward off greed when he said, انظروا إلى من هو أسفل منكم ولا تنظروا إلى من هو فوقكم. Look at those who are beneath you, do not look at those who are on top of you. When you want to look at things, food, drink, materialistic things, you should always look down. You should never look up. If your is full of looking up, you're going to get greedy. If your feet is always like those people who say, hey, this is my crib, yeah, this toilet is made out of gold, yeah, this is filet mignon, I didn't eat it, it's for breakfast. If you eat every single day, you're going to get greedy. It's going to enter your heart. It's human nature. That's the whole point. If your feed is full of refugees, is full of Gaza as it should be, is full of Sudan, is full of our Muslim brothers and sisters who are sprawled wide, then maybe you'll think twice when you want to go for something else. You'll think twice when you go for seconds. You'll think twice before you buy a new item. Even if it's halal, because you realize, I need to lock in, I'm losing sight of things. I need that. Why should I do that? Why should I do that to myself? He told us, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, فَإِنَّهُ أَجْدَرُ أَتَزْدَرُ نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ. This is more conducive that you don't belittle what Allah gave you. Because we have more than everybody on earth. Literally. We have more than anybody in history. That's not an exaggeration. Americans in 2025 have more than any civilization ever had in human history. You're richer than 99.5% of the human population that has ever existed, period. Someone's like, but I'm broke, even you. Because you have AC, because you have heat, because you have multiple pairs of clothing for different seasons, because you eat 3 meals a day, because you eat pieces of animals. You could order certain pieces. That has never existed. But we completely lose sight of that because we're always looking up and we're not aware of these facts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is blaringly telling us. Like, wake up, hello. The Prophet ﷺ also said, من أصبح منكم آمنا في سربه معافا في جسده عنده قوت يومه فكأنما حيزت له الدنيا بمحافلها. Whoever wakes up in the morning and they have safe home, you're not under attack. You don't wake up to the sound of bombs. You don't wake up to militia storming your village and telling you get out to die. You don't wake up wondering, am I safe? And you are well in your body. You don't got to get up on crutches. You don't got to get up and feel around. You don't got to get up and have somebody else take you to the bathroom. And then you have the food of today. You don't got to wonder what you're going to eat today. Those 3 things. You're safe in your home. You don't have to wonder what's for dinner. As well, he said it's as if you were given the dunya with all of its collars. It's as if at all. The problem is that you just might not be aware because you're greedily lusting after other things. Because we're constantly just scrolling past mukbang videos of people. Right? We're just constantly going past sprees in stores where people are buying things and saying, I want to do that. So we do it to ourselves. It's hilarious, right? Laugh like that one more time. So the solution is, number 1, you be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Are you 14? How old are you? Yeah, you. No, how old are you? 14. Okay. So, there's no need. So the first thing is you're conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second thing after having taqwa, which is consciousness and obedience and awareness of Allah, is isma'u wa ati'u. Listen and obey. Follow these commands. The things that are commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just think of Ramadan, we're fasting. Does that curb greed? Where for 12 hours of the day you're giving up food and drink that you need to survive. It's a lesson in that I don't need to eat as much as I think I do. You know, before iftar, especially like at dhuhr, asr time, where it's like a couple hours away, you're making that, right? 16 samosas, 4 plates at least. It better not be leftovers, right? And what happens when you break your fast? What happens after like half a plate? You just can't. You realize that I don't need to eat as much. I can go with way less very often. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed me that by force, because if He didn't by force, I probably wouldn't do it all year long. I'd just be lost in that greed all the time and it's consuming my life. So that's just with fasting. And then if you look at hajj, you look at care for others. All these things that are deen commands, they're going to take time, they're going to take wealth, they're going to take sacrifice. So if you listen to Allah and obey and live a life that is conducive to your purpose, that's in line with the demands of your Creator, automatically going to curb your greed in a lot of situations. That allows you to become rich. There's nothing wrong with being rich. We need rich Muslims who earn it the right way and spend it the right way. That is not a bad goal, to say I want wealth to use for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help others. But it will allow you to be like the Sahaba who were rich, like Abdurrahman ibn Auf, Uthman ibn Affan, and so many others where it was in their hands and not in their hearts. That you hear stories about Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah and Umar ibn Khattab and Talha when they were now victorious, years later after struggling with the Prophet ﷺ for decades. Now that they are rulers of the land and the wealth is pouring in, they would get riches and overnight distribute it. They didn't care. It had no hold on them whatsoever. So obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes you truly rich. The next thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَنْفِقُوا, and give sadaqah. So clearly obvious, right? Way of curing yourself from greed. I earned this money. I spent a lot of time earning it. I wish I earned more. I hate my boss. No, not me. I love Malik. But you guys, maybe. And it means a lot to me. But I'm going to give it to somebody else because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said so. I'm going to give it to somebody else because it makes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala happy. I'm going to give it to somebody else because they can't earn or the same opportunities. That has like a direct way of equalizing this human nature and teaching yourself, training your soul that I'm not going to live for these things, I can easily give it away. If the brothers can move this way. Move to your left. Please. Jazakumullah khairan. We're wrapping up inshallah, so I don't know, so what difference does that make? But anyway, so because of Allah all times, obey His commands, specifically give sadaqah, and lastly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ يُوكَ شُحَّ نَفْسِهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ, and whoever overcomes their own greed, they will be of those who are successful. This is number 5. Number 5 is not in the verse, it's something different, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, overcome your own greed. It's inside of you, it's a part of you, to be super attached to these things, to after them, to list them, to want them more and more. You have to overcome it. He didn't say you're evil for even feeling that, because He's the one who told us it's by design. I made you like that, and I'm telling you fight it. How do you fight it? Besides these 4 ways, the number 5 that's in the verse is you remember death in the hereafter. You remember death in the hereafter. Isa alayhi salam, he said, when he saw this scene and he cried over it, he said, this is what the dunya does to its people, the people who are thinking dunya, who are always thinking worldly life, who only have this one-track mind about having things, eating, dressing, getting the next event, the next car, the next everything, the next cell phone. Those people, that's the worldly life's people. But not all the people who live here are like that. Some people, they're alive here, they function with us all, they also have spouses, they also have homes, they also have cars. View everything in the lens of the hereafter, and that makes them superheroes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَنَفْسَكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَدَاةِ وَالْعَشِيِّ يُرِيدُونَ وَجْهَهُ وَلَا تَعْدُ عَنْهُمْ تُرِيدُ زِينَةَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. Be patient with those who call upon our Lord in the morning and the evening seeking His pleasure. And do not let your eyes look beyond them. Don't look beyond these people to the people who are about the desires of this worldly life. Look at these people and don't pass them over and say, well, what about those? No, don't do that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying. Stick to those people so you don't be of these people who are obsessed with this worldly life and they're heedless of the remembrance of Allah and all they know is following their desires and their state is وَكَانَ أَمْرُهُ فُرْطًا. Their state is going to be complete loss. It doesn't end well for them. So the fifth one is remembering death and the hereafter. This is something that we do every single Friday, right? In our halaqah series here, before Ramadan, and we'll continue sometime after Ramadan, we're going in excruciating detail about death after. What happens after we die? Where do you go next? What does it look like in your grave? What is it in the resurrection, the judgment, the standing before Allah? What will He say to you? What will some people say back? How does it look through the successful lens and then the lens of failure? What happens after the judgment? We're going through all of that. We're somewhere in the middle of that, and we'll continue sometime after Ramadan. So look out. You need to be connected to the hereafter, hearing it all the time, so that you can zone out of this materialistic world that's just bombarding you. Everything's at your fingertips. You got Instagram, Instacart, Uber Eats, TikTok. Everything is about immediate satisfaction, immediate gratification, and have more, enjoy more. Your phone is extra vibrant. It is vibrant beyond what your eyes normally see. That's by design. Ever go to the app page? What does it look like? Looks like candy. It's like candy in a candy store. Every app is a different color. They update the icon of every app every few months to keep you initiated by all these things and you have no way out. That you'll constantly seek more. They're rewiring your soul. So here, thinking of the hereafter, and it doesn't mean you have to be morbid. It doesn't mean you can't enjoy things, but you are constantly keeping yourself in check. In the hadith of Sahl ibn Sa'ad, he says, جاء جبريل إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Jibreel alayhi salam, the angel Gabriel, he comes to the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم to give him advice. What is the advice? He said, عِشْ مَا شِئْتَ فَإِنَّكَ مَيِّتٌ. Live as you please, you're going to die. As long as you live, whatever your life looks like, just know that it's going to end in death. That's how it works for everybody. وَأَحْبِبْ مَا شِئْتَ فَإِنَّكَ مُفَارِقُهُ. Love whomever you will, but know that you'll be separated from them. وَعْمَلْ مَا شِئْتَ فَإِنَّكَ مَجْزِيٌّ بِهِ. And do as you please, you're going to get paid, recompensated with that same action. It's going to come full circle. He didn't say you're going to get compensated or rewarded for it or for it. He said with it. That same action is going to come back to you full circle in this life before the hereafter. You mess around with someone's sister, it's going to come back to your family. You mess around with somebody's wealth, it's going to come back in a time that maybe you need it. You blow up somebody's spot, Allah's going to blow up yours. You seek people's faults, Allah's going to send people to seek out yours. It's exactly how it works. So I said, I'm like really strong advice here. Sounds morbid, but it's all about keeping yourself in check. He didn't say love anybody. He didn't say don't live in this world, don't eat, don't sleep, don't have relationships. No, he said just be careful. Take all these things with a pinch of salt, or else they will overcome you. That's the nature of man, that's the nature of greed. Then finally he told him, وَعْلَمْ أَنَّ شَرَفَ الْمُؤْمِنِ قِيَامُهُ بِاللَّيْلِ وَعِزُّهُ اسْتِغْنَاؤُهُ عَنِ النَّاسِ. And know that the honor of the believer, what makes them noble, what makes them rise above all this, is them standing at night in prayer. Because that is the complete opposite of greed. What do you get? You get tired, you lose sleep, you get hungry, you get thirsty. It even starves your ego because no one sees it. When you stand up for prayer at night, no one's watching. No one's aware of it. Unless you tell others. So it's the complete opposite of greed. And that's why he's saying that's the nobility of the prayer. Where they turn away from all of this and they stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at a time everybody is heedless, everyone is asleep or in sin. And then his power, honor of the believers in what? Standing in Qiyamul Layl in the middle of the night. And his might is in his self-sufficiency from the people. Doesn't look to him. Is not interested in how much they gained or how much they lost. Super focused on a completely different purpose, a completely different outlook. People who look at the hereafter, they don't get extra jubilant when they get stuff. They could get a bonus. They could get a new house. They could get a new car. Again, none of these things are haram if they're earned correctly and spent correctly. But they don't lose it with these things, like lose it in happiness. Like, can you believe what I had? And they go over the top in happiness. They also don't get fear of missing out. When they lose things, they could get sad. But they don't lose their minds. Again, they're completely level, and that allows them to stay locked no matter what happens, no matter what they have or what they lose. Harun Rashid, who was one of the Khulafa, who was extremely rich, extremely powerful. He was also righteous. He was also be someone who supported the scholars, who would encourage learning Islam, who would establish schools. But being a king, being a Khalifa, in that time, in the early Abbasid time, I believe he was the 5th or 4th Abbasid Khalifa, it was a time of luxury. It was a time of pure opulence. The palaces that they built, the processions that they had, the food that it was the peak. It was the golden age of Islam according to who? According to Wikipedia and stuff. Because to them the golden age is when people had stuff. But for us, what's the golden age of Islam? Not just Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but after that, the Sahaba. That's the golden age of Islam, and the next generation, and then the third, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said so. Look at that time, there was tribulations, there was civil war, there was a lot of turmoil, but the general populace had that connection to deen that no one else ever had after them. It only went downhill from there. But if you look up in textbooks and Orientalist takes, they'll say the golden age of Islam was the Abbasids. Then it all began pouring in. They began to, establish science center and like things that were useful, but completely worldly oriented. And they were super rich and they had luxuries and they were able to collect taxes. So to them, that's the golden. Harun al-Rashid is smack in the middle of that. And despite being, again, righteous and having a slightly different outlook or a very different outlook compared to those before him and those after, he still lived in opulence. This was the norm. So he just opened a new palace, opening. And he invites people to this grand opening. And it's the elites of every sector of society. And they're having the fanciest food, they have entertainers, they have singers, they have poets, they have dignitaries from other principalities in his rule. Everyone's coming to congratulate Harun al-Rashid, the new palace that he just built. And as he is inviting the poets, he invites a very famous poet whose name is Abu al-Atahiyya. And Abu al-Atahiyya, he was a righteous man. And he comes and he sits in this gathering. The Khalifa invited him, so he comes. At the lights, he's looking around at the gold and the silver and the chandeliers and the food and the drink and the entertainers and the carpets and the drapes. And he's just looking. He's staying quiet. So Harun al-Rashid turns to him and he says, all the poets have spoken except you. I want to hear what you have to say. You're the man. This is why I brought you here. So he tells him, صِفْ لَنَا مَا نَحْنُ فِي النَّعِيمِ هَذِهِ الدُّنْيَا. Describe the luxuries that's around us right now. Tell me a poem, start spitting freestyle about the luxuries that we're surrounded by. I want to hear how nice. He says, sure, you got it. So he tells him, عِشْ مَا بَدَى لَكَ سَالِمًا فِي ظِلِّ شَاهِقَةِ الْقُصُورِ. Live as you please in what you see, in the shade of palaces that are lofty. Harun al-Rashid says, Ahsan, good. I like it. Keep going. So then he says, يُسْعَى عَلَيْكَ بِتَهَيْتَ لَدَى الرَّوَاحِ أَوْ الْبُكُورِ. You're going to be waited upon with all that you desire, whether it be in the early morning or in the evening when you're... Harun al-Rashid says, nice, I like it. People do serve me. I do have whatever all the time. Keep going. So then he says, فَإِنَّ النُّفُوسَ تَقَعْقَعَتْ فِي ظِلِّ حَشْرَجَةِ الصُّدُورِ فَهُنَاكَ تَعْلَمُ مُوقِنًا مَا كُنْتَ إِلَّا. For surely, when deep in the recesses of your chest, your soul begins violently heave, only then will you know with certainty that you spent all of this time being deceived. Harun al-Rashid starts crying. Everybody turns on Abu Atahiyya, like, what's wrong with you? You couldn't read the vibe? That's not why he brought you here. He brought you for a grand opening, and you made it a funeral. What's wrong with you? And Harun al-Rashid says, leave him alone. He saw that we were blind, and he didn't want us to keep going. He saw that we were heedless, and he's trying to wake us up. He's not in the wrong, we are. We've kind of dove nose first into this hedonistic, materialistic lifestyle that success is determined by how much you have. How many zeros are at the end of your bank account? How many friends you have around you? How many vacations that you go on? How many different foods that you have access to? We made life all about that. We've lost our minds. And Ramadan was actually made to be an alarm bell, like wake up. Stop eating for a little bit. Stop sleeping for a little bit. Hear more Quran than you ever hear any time in your life. So that maybe your soul can wake up and say, wait a second, this is all an illusion. This is a wild goose chase. I don't want to be a crab in a barrel. That's not the ending of my life, the purpose for which I was created. And me making it that will not allow me to see the true purpose or to make strides where I'm supposed to be. So you have to be that person who's completely locked in all the time. That person who's not taken for a ride by the glitter of this life, and who has the ability to swim against the current despite everything that surrounds them, because they're so convinced, they have such conviction in this purpose and this reality, knowing that everything they sacrifice, they're going to in the hereafter multiple times fold over. Doesn't rot, it doesn't change, it doesn't need any upkeep. It's far beyond what anything here has to offer. It doesn't tell you just deny things. It's telling you deny things that aren't worth it for things that are so much more worth it. Say no to a bigger yes. Where's Swahib? Swahib was here? Say no to a bigger yes. You're saying no for something that is actually worth it. You're not just saying no. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to rid our hearts of greed, to make us people who see the reality of this worldly life for what it is, and allow us to lock in for the things that are truly worth it. Do we have a slide, or are you doing questions like that? Do we have the book? Can you give me the books, Ahmed, please? Say it again?
I sent you the questions.
Sure. On WhatsApp?
Yeah.
Okay. Ahmed prepared some questions so we can throw some books at you. Number 1. Abdullah Mubarak said that the people of this worldly life exit it without tasting the sweetest thing in it. And he described it in 4 different ways. Name 2 of them. Okay, Ahmed. Yeah, Adam.